promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution.
KHNc stations in Alt salutes our troops. Whether you're for the war or against it, they're still there. These men and women deserve more than our support. They deserve the comfort of home. Send a military care package today. Just type military care package into a search engine, point, and click. Let's show our troops we care. This message from KHNc stations in Alt, wishing Godspeed to our fighting men and women and thanking them for their triumphs and their sacrifices. The Beth Messiah Congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal mid-Rosh and fellowship. Beth Messiah Congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath.
My name is Howard Real, and this is Real Truth. You're listening to the American Freedom Network, streaming live around the world at AmericanNewsNet.com, and on Facebook, and on YouTube, and on Real TV, and in the book Real Truth, Stay Angry. And, of course, as always, broadcasting out across the Colorado Front Range on KHNc, Johnstown, Colorado, 1360 AM, The Lion. Our call-in number, 877-254-7524. My friends, you're going to want to remember that number because my special guest today, as I've been telling you for the past week, former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, making his fourth appearance on Real Truth. Governor, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Kind of losing my voice. I've been doing so many interviews over the last couple of weeks, but I'm hanging in there.
So many interviews, that's right. And this one is going to be different. I am not going to bore you. The governor has been going around talking about his brand new book, which is excellent and which you folks must go out and buy and read, Democrypts and Republicans. Governor, what's the title all about?
Well, and then you need to read the subtitle, No More Gangs in Government.
Gangs in Government.
I was elected as a third-party candidate in the state of Minnesota and became the 38th governor. And one thing I've realized since then to now, any third party in which to survive is going to have to corrupt themselves like the two we already have. So we've already got a two-headed monster. We don't need a three-headed one. So I'm now calling for the abolishment of all political parties. And I have pretty good allies. Anyone that reads the book will read in Chapter 2. Three of our founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams, concur with me completely that political parties will ultimately destroy the great United States of America, and I think we're there right now because, these two parties, and the title Democrypts and Republicans is to tie them in with the Crips and the Bloods, the street gangs.
Right.
Because if you'll notice, a blue state is a Democratic state, as they refer to it. Well, the Crips' colors are blue. Right. And the Bloods' colors are naturally red, and we refer to a Republican state as a red state. So the tie-in's pretty deep right there. They've even stolen the colors of the street gangs of L.A.
Yeah. They were talking about Ron Paul possibly forming a third party, and then suddenly I woke up one morning, Ron Paul was out of the race, Rand Paul was telling people to vote for Mitt Romney. What happened there? Do you know?
I don't really know. I mean, Ron, of course, wasn't going to get the Republican nomination. You saw how he was treated in the debates. I mean, he was like the red-headed stepchild that shows up on the day they read the will.
Right.
And I was hoping he would break free from the Republican Party, but there's an alternative candidate out there, and I'm urging people, Congress's approval rating hovers around 10%. So that means 90% of us are unhappy with them. The president can't even get over 50%. And there's an alternate choice. Governor Gary Johnson of New Mexico is running. He's a former moderate Republican. He kind of got booted from the nest because they don't allow moderation anymore. And he's running under the Libertarian Party. And I'm urging people, if you're angry and you want to strike out against our government and let them know something, well, then vote for Governor Johnson. You know, when I ran as a third party in Minnesota, the mainstream media tried to pound into the public, well, if you vote for Jesse, you're wasting your vote because he can't win. I'd like to reverse that for a moment and tell people you're wasting your vote if you vote for a Democrat or Republican, because you're not going to see anything different. They're both the same. And if you truly want to make a difference, vote for Governor Johnson, the former governor of New Mexico under the Libertarian Party.
I'm quoting from page 3 of your book. I'll use another analogy, pro wrestling. I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's true. The two gangs pretend to be adversaries in front of the public. Good cop, bad cop, depending on whether you're sitting in the high-priced seats or the bleachers. But ultimately, they're both working for the same things, maintaining their power, getting richer, and making sure their wealthy backers keep control of the ship of state. Governor, I told you this was not going to be a boring interview. It's going to be a unique one, and you're going to remember it, because we're going to spend the hour talking about the ways, just like you say here in your book, the ways that politics and conspiracies in general, because you do a TV show about conspiracy, the way pro wrestling is a perfect metaphor for understanding life. True or not true?
Well, pretty close when it comes to politics. Like I said, they don't care. You know, in front of us, they're adversarial, but behind the scenes, they go out to dinner together. They cut their deals behind the scenes of what they're going to do, and it's all planned out. And they deceive the public, you know. In wrestling, it's harmless. You know, wrestling is entertainment. But in the world of politics, it's not harmless. And I'd like to also say, the Democrats and Republicans are worse than the Crips and Bloods, the street gangs. Let me explain. The Crips and Bloods, you're only going to be affected by them if you live around them. You know, they have to be in your general vicinity. The Democrats and Republicans, they affect every person in the United States of America by what they do, because they encompass the whole country.
Mm-hmm. When Vince McMahon plans WrestleMania, he plans it a year out. And he knows who's going to be in the main event, who's going to be fighting with each other, hitting each other over the head with chairs. The audience, we may not know for a couple of months until right before the event, but it's all planned out, and the winner is already planned out, just like presidential elections, isn't it? Isn't that how it works? Don't the powers that be know who the combatants are going to be and who's ultimately going to win?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Let's go back in time to 2008. When Barack Obama defeated John McCain and became the president. Did you notice on TV that immediately they started running ads about Mormons? Remember that? And they still do it now. They were getting us comfortable with a Mormon president. And, you know, whether that's good or bad, fine. You know, I don't care either way. But you could see it happening 4 years ago. They knew Mitt Romney was going to be their nomination because we started getting inundated with Mormon ads to make the country feel comfortable, because, let's face it, Mormonism isn't as mainstream as some of the other religions. So, you know, I think that was all done on purpose and with a definite scheme to it. And you got your end result now. Mitt Romney is the Republican nomination.
Well, I think you're right on. You are the one person in this nation who is perfectly equipped to talk about pro wrestling and politics and conspiracy. You're at the nexus of all three of those worlds, and I have been telling my audience for a long, long time that they are all connected. You can learn a lot about life by looking at pro wrestling, and in the next 50 minutes, you and I are going to talk about that. Do you remember meeting me in the lobby of the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas many months ago when I walked up to you and shook your hand?
I'd love to say yes, but I have to be honest, and I have to tell you that I meet
Keeping
a lot
me
of
humble,
people.
My friends, we're going to be right back with Governor Jesse Ventura. Go absolutely nowhere.
The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the peoples of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. Psalm 33, verses 10 through 12.
No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque or reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. Article 1, Section 10.
Restore Health and Counseling salutes the men and women in uniform who've answered the call for our freedoms. Let's give them the hero's welcome they deserve as they have fought hard to restore peace. America's troops are our angels of protection, so stand up and salute them proudly. That's from Restore Health and Counseling at 4705 Paris Street, serving Northeast Denver with complete substance abuse counseling for adolescents to adult and for private as well as professional drug, alcohol screening and treatment and rehabilitation. Visit us at www.rhctherapy.com or call 303-373-1188.
Whether you're in automotive, sporting goods, hardware, health, wellness, electrical, electronics, construction, carpet cleaning, legal, or animal care, and offer exceptional customer service and provide quality services or goods, you're honest, reliable, and professional. If you have a business, we have the customers. Let us put you in touch with our loyal, supportive, and dedicated listeners today. They're waiting to hear from you. It's inexpensive. It's effective. Call KHNc at 1-800-205-6245.
My friends, welcome back. My special guest today, Jesse Ventura, brand new book, which I've been talking about for a couple of weeks. You should have gotten it by now, and shame on you if you haven't. Democrats and Republicans, no more gangs in government. Governor, no matter who wins at WrestleMania, Vince McMahon wins because he owns the whole shooting match. No matter who becomes president, the powers that be win. Who are the powers that be? Is it the military-industrial complex? Who wins when these guys win?
Well, right now it's corporations. You know, if you look at the loose definition of fascism, it's when corporations take over the government. And in light of the fact that our illustrious Supreme Court ruled that corporations are the same as individuals, us, and that money is a form of free speech, it's opened the floodgates. They're now getting boatloads of money from corporations. They don't even have to declare who they get their money from. The whole system is completely corrupted by bribery again. If we do bribery in the private sector, we get arrested. Another example is on the stock market. I cover that in the book. I always wondered why congressmen and senators would get elected and they weren't millionaires, but yet they'd come out millionaires. Well, we expose why. Insider trading. They know what's going to happen by laws and regulations and the meetings that they have, what stocks are going to go great, what aren't. We found out that the average congressman and senator on their stock returns makes 12%. That's more than Warren Buffett. And yet, if we do insider trading in the private sector, we go to jail. Talk to Martha Stewart about that. So it's just obscene the way they have the hypocrisy of government. They don't have to follow laws which they inflict upon us, the private sector, and then, of course, we go to jail if we break those laws. Yeah. But well, remember something, though, about Vince and wrestling. Yeah. The wrestlers, too, win, because irregardless if you win or lose the match, you still get your payday. Right. One way or the other. So, they all win there. But the problem in politics is we don't always get our payday when the powers to be profit. Right. In fact, another example. The wrestler who sells for his opponent is highly praised as a great professional. So by losing with Flair, your esteem rises in the wrestling industry. Well, maybe so. Think of this. This last recession we had from 2008, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody in America, 99.9% of Americans lost wealth. Right. I did. I'm sure you did. My house isn't worth what it used to be. We all lost wealth. Yet, that upper 0.1% or whatever, the richest of the rich, and it's in my book, during this last recession, their wealth increased 5 times. So, in other words, if you were worth $20 billion, you're now worth $100 billion, And so clearly it shows me they create these recessions so that they can prosper even more and increase their wealth even more. And it's sick how much money does somebody need? I mean, if you have $10 billion, you, your children, and your grandchildren couldn't spend that money if you tried.
Yeah. I remember back in the WWE, they had the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and he basically bought the title from Andre the Giant. In politics, money buys titles, too. You can buy your way to political office, yes?
Oh, absolutely. Money talks, and you know what walks. You know, the whole system is corrupted. I have a solution, though. You'll love this. I think that all Democratic and Republican candidates for president, Senate, and Congress should be required to wear NASCAR racing suits.
Why is that?
When you look at Jimmy Johnson, the great NASCAR racer, when he finishes a race, you can see all his sponsors. He wears patches. Well, I think they should have to do the same thing so that we are then informed voters. We know who's bought them off. We know who their allegiance is with. And I know I'm being funny there, but the reality is it would help a great deal.
It would help a great deal, but we know that the powers that be own the president. They give millions of bucks to both sides, and whoever gets elected is owned walking in the door.
Oh, yeah. If you go to the Republican and Democrat national conventions this year, you'll see the same corporate lobbyists at both paying off both sides so they don't lose. They win no matter who wins. So, again, I urge people, vote for Governor Gary Johnson, the Libertarian. Throw a wrench in the game. Have some courage, United States of America. Show it to me. Show me some guts and intestinal fortitude and break this ugly spell we've been in for so long.
Yeah, I hear that. The New World Order. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and the others, direct correlation to the real New World Order that the first President Bush mentioned, that your friend Alex Jones talks about all the time. The New World Order that you and Jones talk about, it's a real thing. It's not just a conspiracy theory. It exists.
Well, one of the dangerous things happening right now, and I don't agree with Rand Paul all the time, Ron Paul's son, but he communicated to me, and there's something very dangerous out there that we need to be made aware of. Hillary Clinton and the UN are getting ready to get us to agree to a treaty with the UN which will require international gun registration.
Right.
Which means they're going to disarm the United States civilian population. This will destroy the Second Amendment. Yep. Because if we have to fall subject to international laws like that, they're going to supersede our own Constitution and Bill of Rights. And that's what they're looking to do. They want to register internationally every gun in this country. And I oppose that because people always say, well, you don't worry, we're not going to take your hunting and fishing away from you. I got news for you. When our forefathers created the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, it wasn't for hunting and fishing. If you didn't hunt and fish back then, you didn't live.
Right.
You did it for survival. It was for the civilian population to be able to stand up if the government became oppressive. Now, I've had people say to me, well, how could we possibly stand up to the U.S. military, just with our guns in our homes? Well, I was involved in a little skirmish in Southeast Asia called Vietnam many years ago.
I've heard of it.
They were a bunch of rice farmers with a few AK-47s, and we dropped more ordnance on them than we did World War II. And guess what? We couldn't beat them because they had a resolve. They had a resolve to not be occupied anymore. They were not going to be colonialized by the French nor by us. And they withstood the onslaught of the entire U.S. military. We won every battle, but we couldn't win the war.
Couldn't win the war. In pro wrestling, very, very integral part of pro wrestling is the screw job finish, where someone is winning and dominating the match and something dirty happens and he loses the match. We have those things in politics, too. It's not feet on the ropes and it's not a fast count and it's not a foreign object, but elections involve cheating now. I was going to do a news story today. I'll do it on the show tomorrow. A dead dog was registered to vote in one of the states. We're seeing rigged ballots. We're seeing tampering with debulb machines. What the hell's happening in America in the 21st century? We forgot how to hold elections.
Well, first of all, there isn't truly that much voter fraud. When I was governor of Minnesota, we had same-day registration, and all the naysayers says, oh, my God, we're going to have voter fraud. Now you can register on the same day. Voting should be easy, not difficult. And there isn't truly that much. But these electronic voting machines must be gotten rid of because you can hack them the same you can any computer. And let me put it to you in a basic term. Would you go to an ATM machine that didn't offer you a receipt?
Never.
No. No, you wouldn't. Well, electronic voting machines offer no receipt. They can be hacked into. Let's say hypothetically, okay, you're going to vote for Gary Johnson. You can push the electronic voting machine for Gary Johnson, but you have no way of knowing if it recorded for Gary Johnson. It could record for Mitt Romney or Barack Obama.
Right.
There is no receipt with these electronic voting machines, and there's no way that you can have a recount with them because all they do is give you numbers like an adding machine. We're fortunate in Minnesota. We've had a few close elections for the Senate a couple years and for governor a couple years ago, but we still fill in on ballots where you take a pencil and mark it in. Now, if people are not capable, where you can then count them individually, you get a receipt. If people are not capable of filling in the little circle, they shouldn't be voting because you've been doing that since first grade. When you went to first grade, you took tests where you had to circle and fill in the little circle. So there's no excuse, but we need to go back to primitive paper ballots that can be recounted and get rid of these electronic voting machines.
I hear that. I am with you 100%. Way back in the early 1990s, I wrote a book. It never got published. It's called Everything I Need to Know About Life I Could Learn from Professional Wrestling. It was submitted by literary agents to the major publishers, and no one wanted to publish it, and they told me why. It's because we don't believe wrestling fans read books. Well, that's obviously wrong. We know now wrestling fans do read books, but I'm looking at the body of wrestling fans is so diverse and includes people from absolutely all walks of life, every country in the world. We saw Occupy Wall Street happening, all over the place. And the pundits were knocking it because they don't represent anything specific. What do they want? Who are they? The very point of Occupy Wall Street was that it was so diverse. It was people from all walks of life rising up in anger against the system that's crushing us. How did you feel about Occupy Wall Street?
I totally supported it. In fact, in Minneapolis, I went down 6 times. I'm too old to spend the night when it gets cold now. I'm 60. But I did one night. I went to the hardware store, and I bought them out of hand warmers. And I had a big box of them, and I took them down there and plopped them on the table. I said, here, you people are going to need this. Get this. And all they were protesting was the buying of our politicians by Wall Street. Stop, they said, stop buying our politicians. Well, they got ran off with pepper spray and dogs. Right. And I told people you should support what they're doing even if you disagree with them, because they are simply exercising their First Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
And someday you're going to want to do it over something, and then you're going to get run off with dogs and pepper spray. You know what happened in Minneapolis? They used a local ordinance that didn't allow generators in the park. Now, Minneapolis gets as cold or colder than Denver does, Colorado, unless you're way up in the mountains. And, it gets cold. Well, none of the occupiers could have generators to keep warm because of the local city ordinance, but yet there was a generator running 24/7 right in the park for the government. See, again, they don't have to abide by their own laws. And you know what that generator was doing? On top of a pole, it had a surveillance camera on all the occupiers, so they had them under 24-hour surveillance with a generator, and yet the people weren't allowed to have generators to keep warm.
Well, you've seen police cars run red lights, haven't you? They're allowed to do that.
Certainly a police car can do that, but when you've got a park ordinance, why don't the government have to abide by it? Well, you can't have a generator in the park.
You're right. One time, shortly after you were elected governor, I saw an interview you did, and you said the politicians that you see in public, they're different people behind the scenes. When they're alone, they're different people. Me, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. There's a video on YouTube about Abdullah the Butcher, who owns a restaurant. He's a sweet guy. I think he's from Georgia. He is not a Sudanese madman. The Sheikh Ed Farhat, not a crazy sheik from the Middle East shooting fire out of his fingers. He was a family guy. He was a businessman. Politicians that we see on TV, they're different behind the scenes. Tell us how.
Well, you know, you got all of them that are gay and in the closet. You got a group of them that won't come out and say that they're gay. Another guy who was amazing is George the Animal Steele.
Yep.
You know, everybody thought George the Animal was this imbecile. He was a high school teacher and football coach. He used to wrestle just in the summer until he started making too much money wrestling, so he left his teaching. So there's a classic example of a well-educated man, a football coach and a high school teacher who was a pro wrestler and portraying himself as this, you know, imbecile chewing on the turnbuckle that had, you know, probably an IQ of 12.
Right. Well, you know what knocked me on my backside was when I saw Ivan Koloff being interviewed recently on the Internet. No Russian accent. Since I was a little boy, I've known that Ivan Koloff is the Russian bear. In real life, he's not Russian.
Not at all.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, pro wrestling, politics, conspiracy, life, it all melds together. My guest is Jesse Ventura. This is Real Truth. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Phillips, founder of the Green Herb.
The people who are controlling the government of America are the same people who are trying to control your family's health care. You can sit quietly by and accept their plan, or you can take responsibility for your health. What would happen if you could no longer obtain the medications you're now taking? Would you be forced to join the ranks of corrupt agents just to purchase the medicine? If you're one of the thousands of concerned citizens who would like to know more about a natural way, God's way to health, drop by the Green Herb for a natural solution and all the information you need to make an intelligent decision. Or go to our website, www.thegreenherb.com. Come by the Green Herb, located in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, on the I-70 Frontage Road North, 1 mile west of Kipling, or call 888-765-HERB. That's 888-765-4372. And be sure to listen to the Green Herb Show with Linda and Dr. Cass every Tuesday at 1 o'clock on KHNc.
Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone into the world. By this you will know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua, Jesus, has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Yeshua, Jesus, has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have already heard was coming and is now already in the world. 1 John 4:1.
Article 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. CINN Stations in Alt salutes our troops. Whether you're for the war or against it, they're still there. These men and women deserve more than our support. They deserve the comfort of home. Send a military care package today. Just type military care package into a search engine, point, and click. Let's show our troops we care. This message from CINN Stations in Alt, wishing Godspeed to our fighting men and women and thanking them for their triumphs and their sacrifices. The Beth Messiah Congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal mid-Rosh and fellowship. Beth Messiah Congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath.
My friends, welcome back. My special guest today, former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, talking about his brand new book, which you all must get and read, Democrats and Republicans, No More Gangs in Government. Governor, I once interviewed Bruno Sammartino over the phone. And I said to him, listen, you remember when Stan Hansen broke your neck? Was that a work or was that real? Bruno got angry. Of course it was real. I was in a hospital bed for blah, blah, blah. We see what we want to see, people. For a long time, I would watch wrestling. I started watching wrestling when I was 15. And I could see punches that missed and, people who were pulling their punches and not really kicking the other guy. But I like to believe it was real, and so it was. Same thing with politics, isn't it? People still, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Ann Coulter, they're all still playing the Republican versus Democrat thing because it puts money in their pockets. But when you grow up, you realize life ain't like that, right?
Yeah, very much so. I like to describe wrestling a different way. It's ballet with violence.
Okay.
It's an art form.
Mm-hmm.
What they do, when Randy Macho Man Savage would come off that top rope with the elbow, if he's not precision perfect, the guy laying on the mat is dead.
Right.
He could kill him. So people need to look at the art form and how talented these guys are. And so, like I said, I refer to it as ballet with violence.
Well, that's a good description of both my marriages, but we're not going to go there. I always wondered, how is, let's get away from topic for a minute. Two big, burly guys going at it in the ring. One guy kicks the other guy in the head. How come the guy on the floor doesn't think to himself, hey, he didn't have to kick me that hard, and then get angry? How come a real, honest-to-goodness fist fight doesn't break out in every match?
Because we're professionals. Okay. It's that simple.
You suck it up.
Well, you're professional. You realize a mistake can happen. Now, if you think the guy did it to you intentionally, well, then they got something called a receipt, where you'll pop him back. But for the most part, the first thing I was taught as a pro wrestler was to protect my opponent's body as if it were mine. Because imagine that what you bear. If I hurt my opponent and he can't wrestle for a month, there's no unions in wrestling. There's no paydays unless you're in the ring.
Right.
And if I hurt my opponent and put him out of commission, his family doesn't eat. Well, that's quite a thing to bear, that you're responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you go in realizing, as I said, the golden rule that the first thing you're taught in training is treat your opponent's body as if it were yours.
Yeah. I believe that we have a caller on the line. Do we have with us?
Hello.
Welcome, caller.
Hello.
Who is this?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's your consigliere.
Len Cavallaro. Welcome to the show.
So
what would you like to ask the governor?
Well, I'd like to ask him a little bit about Skyhorse Publishing, because it seems to me that a man with 2 bestsellers, if I'm not mistaken, your first 2 books were bestsellers, were they not?
Well, the first two books I wrote, one of them was with 2 major, who was it with? I can't even remember anymore, my autobiography. Simon & Schuster was one of them, and I forget the other one. But when I went to publish my latest 4 books, I couldn't even get those people to talk to me anymore. And Skyhorse to me... Skyhorse to me is a publisher with courage, because they print books by L. Fletcher Prouty that's been banned before. They're independently owned, and they're perfect for someone like me.
What's your question, Len?
That's precisely the point, though. Right now, with the advent of corporate media, meaning that all we're going to get, whether it's the New York Times or Fox News or anything in between, is going to be basically the party line. Here we have Bertelsmann owning Random House. We've got News Corp owning HarperCollins. We've got CBS owning Simon & Schuster. We've got all these big multi-glomerate corporations owning the book publishers, or certainly owning the major New York book publishers.
You're exactly correct.
Isn't this just another aspect of this horrible control that these powers behind the throne, I sometimes call them the NWO, are seizing on us, and they're limiting us more and more in what we can do?
You are absolutely correct. I heard Dan Rather talk the other day, and it was very interesting, because when he reported on George Bush's military record, it was totally true. Totally true, and he got fired for it. But and that in itself, you tell the truth, you get fired by the corporate. But he also pointed something else out that was chilling. He said 20 to 25 years ago, there were literally 30 to 40 independent media outlets in our country. Because of corporate takeover, we're down to 4.
Right.
4 corporations control everything you hear and see, basically. Now, when corporations control government and control everything like that, it's called fascism.
Absolutely.
Well, what's his name? Dick Morris writes about that extensively in his new book, Screwed, how the media is a small party and just a handful of people decide what we're going to hear. It's, again, all roads lead back to wrestling. You know, it used to be there were 3 big organizations in America, then the AWA went bye-bye, and it was left with WCW and WWF. WCW went by. Now it's a monopoly. Pro wrestling in America is a monopoly. Is that good or bad?
Well, there's that other organization.
Well, there's TNA also.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it was even bigger than that. When I first got into wrestling, those AWA, NWA, and WWF were really, Vern Gagne ran the AWA, Vince Sr. ran the WWF, and the NWA was all these other, there were 26 separate territories when I started wrestling. 26 individual territories run by promoters, and they all had more or less unwritten laws that no one would cross into another person's territory.
Right.
But then, of course, came cable television, and Vince McMahon was brilliant. He was like the P.T. Barnum of our generation. He bought up cable TV, he bought up the biggest stars, and he took it across the country, and lo and behold, this is what you have now. I remember I used to ride in the car with the late Big John Studd.
Right.
And every time we'd hear of a territory folding, Big John's knuckles would turn white on the steering wheel, and he'd look at me and he'd go, "That's not good. It's not good." And Big John was right, because the less you have, the more things get monopolized, the less opportunity there is for a majority of people.
That's exactly right. Len, what else do you want to say?
No, I just find this whole analogy fascinating because, honestly, I think pro wrestling is a metaphor not only for life but particularly for contemporary politics, the phoniness of it and the idea that no matter what, I mean, they'll even tell us who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. Look, Hogan was a face. He defeated Flair, the heel. Then they made Flair the heel, the face, and he defeated Hogan as the heel. But sometimes Hogan as a heel could defeat Macho Man, who was a face. Sometimes the roles were reversed. So the Republicans are to blame. The Democrats are to blame. This one's raising deficits. This one's raising deficits. They just give us the same lines, and we're supposed to cheer for the good guys and boo the bad guys.
You know, it's funny, the exact what you're talking about. When I taught at Harvard in 2004, one of my classes at Harvard University was how pro wrestling prepares you for politics.
There you go. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Len, thanks for calling. Governor, stick around. More Real Truth ahead.
The Beth Messiah Congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal, mid-Rosh and fellowship. Beth Messiah Congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath. If catastrophe struck, would your family be prepared? Are you confident you wouldn't react in a panic? Is there one place to get all of your emergency supplies? Ferris Survival encourages you to have confidence through preparation, not panic through crisis. Ferris Survival, located at 3366 South Broadway, is a professional, reputable, full-service business providing quality, realistic preparedness supplies at an affordable price. Go online, stop by, or call 303-781-0343. Ferris Survival.
If you're spending hard-earned money on supplements, you need to know about BioSuperfood because you're probably shortchanging yourself on nutrition and value. If you're buying products claiming to provide DNA protection from radiation, you're getting ripped off by inferior copycat products because there's no other product developed or researched like BioSuperfood. BioSuperfood is one complete superfood product that addresses radiation poisoning, allergies, arthritis, diabetes, high blood pressure, and other degenerative diseases. BioSuperfood helps digestion, decreases pain and inflammation, increases flexibility, improves heart health and brain function. It boosts your immune system and even inhibits the AIDS virus and cancerous cells. It's an antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory. BioSuperfood is not another supplement. It's a whole food and contains over 5,000 nutrients. Call now and ask about your special discounts on your BioSuperfood purchase at 303-257-7576. That's 303-257-7576 or biosuperfood@hotmail.com.
Welcome back. My special guest today, Governor Jesse Ventura, his new book, Democrips and Republicans, No More Gangs in Government. Governor, I used to watch wrestling as a kid, and people would stand up and lie. Grand Wizard, Lou Albano, Bobby Heenan, Freddie Blassie, all the great old managers would lie to your face, and they'd keep lying, and that was okay because that was all in fun. When Barack Obama stands up in front of a TV camera and says the private sector is doing just fine, he knows that people out here like you and me know he's lying, and he doesn't care. He's free to tell all the lies he wants and never has to worry about any repercussions, right?
Well, let's also give credit where it's due. When George Bush and Dick Cheney told us in Iraq they had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda, none of that was true. And we end up invading a country, occupying it, overthrowing a government. I couldn't believe that because that destroyed my American dream. I never believed the United States would take our military, put it at the border of another sovereign nation who hadn't did anything to us, invade them, overthrow their government, and occupy them. That's what the Nazis did. That's what the communists did. Now we've done it. So don't put all the blame just on Barack Obama being a liar. So was George Bush and Dick Cheney.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, these deals, what we see as politics is the result of backroom deals that we are never, ever privy to. In the same way back in WCW, I read lots of accounts of Hulk Hogan having so much political swing in the locker room that he was basically dictating the direction of WCW. The two are one and the same. Backroom politics is backroom politics wherever you find it, isn't it?
Yeah, he got me fired.
How'd that happen?
After I left WWF, I went to WCW. As soon as Hogan came in, they got rid of me on Hogan's orders.
Why? What did Hogan have against you?
Well, it goes back to the WWF. Right before I did Predator, I tried to unionize wrestling. You know, football has a union, basketball has a union, and one day I was on an elevator in Las Vegas, and I ran into the old football great Gene Upshaw, the Raiders.
Sure.
And Gene looked at me in that deep voice of his and says, "You boys need to unionize in wrestling." And I said, "I know." Because I was paying $5,000 a year for my family's health care. There's no retirement in wrestling. It isn't just to fight Vince McMahon. There's strength in numbers. You get benefits if you unionize. Well, what happened was this. I was in a dressing room right before WrestleMania 2, and I stood up in front of the boys. Nobody from the office was there, and I said, "Boys, if we want to unionize, now is the time. All the publicity's gone out on WrestleMania 2. All we have to do is go to the federal guys and say, we refuse to wrestle unless union people are brought in, right?" And I gave an impassioned speech. The next day, Vince McMahon called me and nearly fired me. He said, "What is this union crap? You're standing on a soapbox preaching, blah, blah, blah." Well, then I went off. I quit, and I went to do Predator because he wasn't even going to let me do the movie Predator. He told me I couldn't do it. So I quit and said, basically, the heck with you. I can do wrestling anytime. How many times will I get a chance to co-star with Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie? So I went off and did Predator. I then became a member of the Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA. So when I came back to McMahon, when he wanted me back and hired me back, I told him, you don't have to worry about union anymore. If these guys are too stupid and won't do it, I don't care. I got my union now, and I'm still a member today. I get retirement, I get medical benefits and all of that from SAG. Well, when I sued Vince McMahon for royalties on all the tapes and stuff I was on, during the deposition, I told my lawyer, find out who ratted me. I told him the whole story. So my lawyer led Vince right in and said, Mr. McMahon, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And he goes, no. Has anyone ever tried to form one? And Vince said, well, Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it one time. My attorney said, well, were you there? Did you hear him? And Vince, with no hesitation, said, no, Hulk Hogan told me.
There you
go.
go.
Hogan ratted me. When I came into wrestling, the worst thing you could be in wrestling was what we called an office stooge. Somebody who would pretend to be one of the boys, but yet was stooging and squealing to the office. And McMahon even admitted that. Hogan said it's not true, but McMahon even admitted the same story another time on Larry King, because Larry King brought the same story up to him, and Vince verified it again. And remember, when I had Vince in deposition, he's under oath, because in a federal deposition you are under oath. You can't lie during a deposition or you face perjury charges. And the way he answered it so quickly, so Hogan stabbed me in the back.
It's not good. As we say in Yiddish, is nicht gut. It's not a good thing to happen.
Well, that's the true story of what happened, and I've never spoken to Hogan again. He claims it isn't true, but, McMahon, like I said, did it under federal deposition after he took an oath on the Bible. Come on. And then he also repeated the same story on Larry King to Larry King, and I believe Vince, because somebody ratted me.
Well, it wasn't me. We have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to Real Truth. What? There we go. Welcome. What would you like to ask the governor?
Hello.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask the governor a question on the lighter side. I'm real fond of Baja California. I first drove the peninsula down there in 1989, 1990. And back then it was fairly deserted. Hello?
Yeah,
we're here. We're headed for a commercial.
Yeah, okay.
Be brief.
I wanted to know what part he likes, because they're all different, but they're all beautiful.
Well, you're exactly right, and I've driven it now 6 or 7 times, because I don't fly to the Baja, I drive it every year.
Right.
It's 3,000 miles from my home in Minnesota to my home in Mexico. Every trip's an adventure. It's a wonderful place. It's got places that are so beautiful you can't believe it. I like it all, personally, except for Tijuana and Ensenada.
Do you like the Sea of Cortez side or the Pacific side?
I like the Sea of Cortez side. I live on the Sea of Cortez side.
Sure. Well, thanks, Governor.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the call. You're in Mexico, do you not, Governor?
What's that?
You live part of the year in Mexico.
Yeah, I live down there 5 months of the year. I leave here in the winter. Well, I got called on one interview, what did they call me, a fake citizen, because I live in Mexico. And I said, no, I just don't like winter.
Well, I can relate to that. We're going to take one last break, and then we'll be back, and we'll finish things up here on Real Truth. My friends, don't go anywhere. We got more good stuff coming.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1 through 3. We, the
people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
KHNc stations in Alt salutes our troops. Whether you're for the war or against it, they're still there. These men and women deserve more than our support. They deserve the comfort of home. Send a military care package today. Just type military care package into a search engine. Point and click. Let's show our troops we care. This message from KHNc stations in Alt, wishing Godspeed to our fighting men and women and thanking them for their triumphs and their sacrifices. Restore Health and Counseling salutes the men and women in uniform who've answered the call for our freedoms. Let's give them the hero's welcome they deserve as they have fought hard to restore peace. America's troops are our angels of protection.